Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for filling out the poll and putting so many comments in the chat. It's wonderful to see so many folks here today. And I wanted to start out by saying thank you. Like I said, thank you. When we started this session of Building Community Network, we said that our focus was going to be this year and for years to come, the focus would be on social and racial equity. And we knew going into this that the conversations wouldn't be easy. And that we all stacked hands and said, okay, we're ready, let's do this. These conversations are long overdue. And as I was reflecting on that, and then also listening to other conversations, I heard someone recently talking about what he called the courage gap. And as he was talking about the courage gap, he talked about the courage to care, the courage to understand, and the courage to act. And we at GCN and also at the Home Depot Foundation, we want to thank everyone here for stepping into the courage gap in new ways over this past year, and for taking the time to understand, which we know is an ongoing journey, and really having that courage to act. And so to kick us off this morning, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Dietra for being here with us today. We're very honored to have you here and are looking forward to this conversation and for learning from each other. Thank you also to Park Pride and to Good Samaritan Health Center for being willing to share your knowledge and learnings with us today. And then also to our folks who are going to serve as small group facilitators, thank you. So thank you to Georgia Center for Nonprofits. And as we step into the courage gap together, we welcome you. So thank you.
Thank you, Heather. And again, I always do this, but I want to again thank the Home Depot Foundation for leading in community by sponsoring BCN and allowing us to have these very important focus on equity across the year. We thank you and Jenna, our hometown team, and the entire foundation team for making this possible. We really appreciate it. Want to also ask for a little help from all of our participants today. I know we're going to be heavy chat users today, but complete that poll, and we want you to also, along the way, not right this second, but you can do it whenever, maybe put a little comment in the chat about what you may have learned or gotten out of our sessions across the program year so far. As you'll recall, we met with Living Cities and the Urban Institute over the past few months. And you'll note also along the way that we're going to put a couple of questions in the chat for you to respond to today, dealing with kind of resources and support that you and your team may need to push this work forward in your own organization. So just kind of keep an eye on chat a little bit. And if you would just kind of put that feedback for us, we would really appreciate it. We like to remind you that our program year will culminate with Out of Hand Theater's Equitable Dinners at Work on March 24th, presented with a 10-minute play followed by group discussions. To be clear, this program will start at 1 p.m., so not necessarily a dinner, but that's what they call it. So that's what we're titling it. So it will start at 1 p.m. And we'll all grab some coffee, and it's going to be an amazing experience. They've developed a play just for this, and we'll have a lot of group interaction. With that, I want to briefly introduce what we're going to be doing today. As you know, we heard from Living Cities about their own strategy inflection in completely retooling and putting equity at the center point of internal and external strategy. And that session helped us understand what kind of somewhat the mental transition that happened in the CEO role, right? And how he was supported by an amazing leader who was at the time well below the executive team, as well as the outcomes that happened. We moved to a presentation by the Urban Institute, capturing ways that we can look at equity issues from a data perspective to build understanding of whose data we use when we're building strategy, and how data can be a tool for consensus and how it can be used to guide strategies that have equity at the center point. And today we wanted to come home to our community and present what some of your peers are doing to address equity issues. Most of us know that this work is critically important, but there are many of us across the state and the country who are confused about where and how to start, if we can lead, if we have the capability to lead such an initiative with our staff, if we have the time and resources to do this work, and on and on. There's plenty of consternation. So we wanted to make transparent that no leader and organization has it all figured out. We saw that at Living Cities, and that everyone is on a journey and in many different dimensions of that journey. The main thing is that it's important to find an entry point and begin. And so this session is being facilitated by Dr. Dietra Hawkins, who is the owner and lead consultant with Equity by Design. She's a licensed clinical psychologist and has led equity initiatives with a variety of nonprofit, corporate, and governmental agencies using appreciative inquiry methodology. And today we're bringing teams from Park Pride and Good Samaritan to discuss their respective work on equity issues. We have both CEOs, Michael Halicki and Veronica, but importantly, we wanted to also note that we're look through the lens of staff and board as well. So we have Luis Avila Estrada, a board member with Park Pride and Cox Enterprises, and an executive with Cox Enterprises, and Lauren Ferguson, who is Community Outreach Manager at Good Sam. And I wanted to thank each of these leaders, as Heather did, for offering to share their journey and preparing for this with us today. Our format, we're going to have 2 sections of discussion, and Dr. Hawkins will set the context. Then Michael and Luis, Veronica and Lauren will discuss leading equity work internally with boards and with staff by finding entry points and centering the voices of those most impacted and engaging staff. Then we're going to break out into small groups that are going to be facilitated. So if you're a facilitator, pay attention. And they've been set up already, so that magical time travel, you'll automatically be sent into a room with a facilitator and some questions. And we'll discuss, come back, debrief, and have a second round of discussion that will center around creating an organizational culture that is centered on equity. And again, we'll break out to discuss, then come back, and Dr. Hawkins will close us out with a brief exercise, and we will end, I promise you, promptly at 12. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dietra Hawkins to get us started.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you both to Karen and Heather for helping us get started and inviting me to be here with you all today. It's wonderful to see everyone on camera. It's always nice when I can actually see a whole room of faces, even though we can't be in person together and able to move about and give hugs. But we're excited to be here for this conversation, and what I'm hoping to do is really help highlight that we will both have some important questions as well as some opportunities to connect with each other. I did want to set the stage, and I think we've started that by highlighting one, that we absolutely have to have courage to lean into these conversations, to understand that it takes bravery, that it takes vulnerability to ask some of these questions as well as to listen to them. It is also really critical that we recognize that we are on a journey. So in my work, I'm always talking about we are facing a direction, that we use equity as the way to help us know where we're looking, and that we are not so much focused on where we are trying to arrive, especially in the sense of having what we would call the destination so much, or where I think other organizations end up being often is we fly into what we call action bias. We want to fix something. So we become aware that something is not quite right, and then we're ready to fix it. And we're not necessarily doing that in partnership. So today we're going to be hearing about how partnership is working. You know, we are learning from the partners at Park Pride and with Good Samaritan, and hearing stories of not just from the leadership, but really from the across, understanding that we must center the voices of those who are most impacted. The other piece that I wanted to highlight in this work is that sometimes we focus a lot on facts. And what I'm hoping that we'll all be learning and having an opportunity to do is to lean into dialogue, which is different than debating, and stories. We hold on to stories. I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to remember someone's story more than I might remember that person's name. And so in our breakout conversations, which we will be intentionally inviting you into, we hope that you will tell a story and not just give a list of, you know, these are the things I've been thinking about, but actually try and tell a story. And also the strategy is to learn how to do that in a short period of time. I wanted to mention 2 more things in terms of setting the stage. I find many organizations are often ready to have a strategy, ready to look at this work as sort of like a checkbox. Let me do a workshop. There are two things that we've learned over time. It takes both relationships, so being relational, showing up. You have an example, an opportunity to do that with the equitable dinners, and also information. So there's a nice video on intersectionality, and it says, you know, Google doesn't judge. We know that Google might take your information, but it's not necessarily judging. So in that, though, you can go and get information and learn from yourself so that you don't have to center people of color's stories and the burden of telling their story over and over again. But we can, after you've gotten to a place to be able to ask them different questions, make sure you're centering their stories, making sure that you are moving forward, having a real partnership and relationship with those who you are recognizing as being most impacted. And lastly, I would just highlight that there's really an important role in asking a different kind of question. And actually, that's part of our poll, right? So where are you on this journey? Recognizing that many of us might be in different places. So I'm not quite sure if we're ready to actually look at the poll feature and the results there. Okay, great. So this is wonderful, just seeing so far that most of you are saying that you are learning while in practice. And I want to really validate the reason we often do this in an anonymous way is that it's helpful to know that some of us, maybe more than we're willing to acknowledge, are still, kind of afraid, not quite sure. Most of the organizations I work with, what we hear over and over again is, I just don't want to get it wrong. That I really don't want to, hurt anyone. And we often tell people, this work is messy, and part of the skills that we need are being able to say, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry I'm stepping on your toe. Let me get off of it. So do we have these conversations? It looks like we are having the conversations. It also looks like there's a mix of whether or not we're able to include many people from different backgrounds, and that with friends and family, we're frequently having these important conversations, which is wonderful. So we like to do this to kind of see where we all are and what stories we can share. And although for the most part, many of us maybe haven't read all of these different books, there are probably some other books that we have read. Please add those resources in chat. We're always trying to collect and learn what people are reading. And also, what are you watching in terms of movies and other ways to engage? And with podcast, I will say we didn't list one here, but there's a really wonderful one with Brene Brown that has been great with Akia Bethia. So we've been really highlighting that there's a number of different resources out there, and that we have an opportunity. I see we've got about 30% of us who actually do know the native land that our homes are built on. This is important work that we can all be involved in, and there's some links that we can share with people for how to learn about what that Indigenous land is and tell those stories. So I want to just acknowledge that we are here to have a conversation together. I want to start off by inviting our panelists to be able to really share their story quickly of where they are in this journey, and to try and help us get a sense of what that journey has been like. So I am going to first invite Park Pride to get us started.
Excellent. It's good to be with all of you today. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. So good to hear. And I'm glad to be here with so many good friends. I was looking over the folks that are attending here today, and I see a number of Park Pride board and staff, and some of our park friends, including Piedmont Park, Grant Park Conservancy, and then groups like Truly Living Well in the Beltline. And these are really all part of our ecosystem of groups that we work with, and I feel like we're all in this together. I do want to share a little bit, and I'm going to tag team with Luis Avila Estrada, who is the co-chair of our DEI committee. I'll also mention Jeff Ellman is here and participating. He's the other half of the co-chairing for the DEI committee. Park Pride, we're a 30-year-old nonprofit. Our mission is to engage communities to activate the power of parks. We're a locally based group that works in Atlanta and DeKalb. And we have been playing a role for the past 3 decades of connecting communities to resources to improve their parks and to make sure that those parks meet the community's needs. We work all throughout our areas, but I think we will be the first to acknowledge that there's some communities that have some abilities to access our resources than others. And that's something that we have increasingly looked at ways that we level the playing field. This has been something that I also will acknowledge that we are on a journey. If there is a destination, it's far in the future, but I feel like we are on that kind of learning effort of putting pieces together. For me personally, this began, I've been at Park Pride for going on 8 years, 7 to 8 years at Park Pride. A couple of years ago, a number of staff at Park Pride participated in a weekend workshop that was hosted by a group called the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And a local Black-led environmental organization known as the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance that many of you know had played a role and continues to bring them to Atlanta for intense weekend workshops. A total of 5 of our staff went through those different trainings, and they really were, I think, transformational experiences for us on a personal level. I will say that it factored into our work at Park Pride, though one of the challenges was as you're looking at that as a personal journey and then bringing it into an organization, even my role as executive director, the translation there on how it fits wasn't readily apparent. And we had these bonding experiences with the folks that were part of our classes, but bringing that into the conversations at the staff or board level was something that was a real challenge. But nonetheless, I do find that the 5 of us with a staff of 15 going through those trainings changed the tone and tenor of some of the conversations we were having as we were embarking on an update of our strategic plan. One of the things that came out of that was a culling and refinement of our core values that identified respect, equity, inclusion, collaboration, and trust, many of those having an equity dimension in addition to equity itself, which I think was a chance to take something that was in some ways assumed within the organization and made it much more direct and explicit. When we also got into the work plan itself, it identified the need to apply an equity lens to both our external programs as well as our internal operations. And so the trainings that I described, we did in 2017, 2018. We adopted our strategic plan in February of 2019. That was our 30th anniversary, and it was a big year for us. And to be honest, we kind of struggled with where to go from there. There weren't resources that were committed to hire an external consultant. There was a question of even where to begin on that front. And 2019 was really a year of having internal conversations and not really knowing how to get in gear. One of the things that resulted from that effort was kind of the acknowledgement that we needed to increase our cultural competency as an organization. I think when the strategic plan was adopted, it was assumed that staff would take the lead in applying that equity lens. And I will say that, and this is, I think, a word to the wise for groups that find themselves in that situation, the staff were really in a very difficult situation there, that on the one hand, they're either calling out different things and but also not being sure where the bar should be, or they're validating the different good things that are happening, but feeling like they might be giving folks a false sense of security. So it was really from that we started down a path of looking at finding an external consultant. And it was around that time that I had conversations with Karen about the fact that finding that community of other nonprofits that have done this work, as well as the consultants that were available, that we really struggled, that we found that it was difficult to find consultants. We found that a number of groups that we spoke to were facing similar questions of not knowing where there were resources, or even a cohort of groups that were at a similar point. And that's why I'm really glad that the Home Depot Foundation has supported this whole series, and I think helps to build a community of groups that are on the journey and looking for ways to do more work on this front. We did come across Dietra Hawkins, and Dietra has been a coach and a guide for us as we've started down this path. One of the things that was interesting about our work was we initially were looking at doing a staff training. And again, looking at the work that we had done individually and bringing it back, and the staff being tasked with really applying that lens. And Dr. Hawkins really challenged us to think about involving the leadership. So we brought this to our executive committee and talked about the idea of actually shifting the focus to a series of, and not just a single day, but a series of different efforts to engage our executive committee and our full staff. At the time, we were also recruiting folks to join our board that had, two in particular that had an interest in being change agents on the board as we look at making our board more reflective of the communities we serve. And Luis Avila Estrada was one of those. And I'll give him a chance to kind of pick up from there in terms of as he got involved with the process and how the board got more involved. Luis.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. And thanks for inviting me to be a part of this important conversation. I'm sorry. I guess I could just start with a little bit of background on myself. So I moved to Atlanta about 3 years ago from Chicago. Grew up in the south side of Chicago. For those of you familiar with the south side of Chicago, it tends to be the more lower income, less resourced side of Chicago. And grew up in what was a low income, mostly people of color, mostly immigrant community, with schools and other institutions that didn't necessarily have the same type of offerings for the community that maybe other communities did. So I was very lucky in that I was near a park that was close to me that offered different physical activities, arts and crafts activities, community activities that made my life probably a lot more different today than it would have otherwise. So I came to the organization with that perspective. I've also been very focused on my outside of my professional work on Latino organizations. First, starting with the most personal, right? I'm an attorney and wanted to create more diversity within the legal profession. So I started with Latino organizations, trying to do that. I'm also a member of the LGBT community, so focusing on getting more LGBT people in the profession, and then expanding from there just to focus again on those two communities outside of the legal profession. But really came to the conversation with Michael, and it actually was introduced to Michael through the Georgia Center for Nonprofits, because I wanted to expand the experiences that I had, my personal history, my perspective, to an organization that was serving all communities, right? Not just focusing on the Latino community and their needs, but bringing those needs and perspectives to an organization that was providing this very important resource that I thought I had personally benefited from to the city at large and beyond that. So, I think that as Michael just described, Park Pride was already on a journey to really focus on the makeup of their board and making sure that it reflected the communities that they were trying to serve, also with the staff, but also in how they were looking at different programs that they were, that makes Park Pride. So when I joined, and I joined with Atiba and Biwan, who was, I think, a legend in the community here. So I was very honored and proud to get to know him through the process. But we joined at a time when we joined, the board was, I think, 25% people of color. I mean, this is only my second year. We are now at a point where we are 44% people of color on the board, which I think is great progress. But I think it's also in large part to the fact that Michael and the rest of the board have really made an effort to just reach out to people who have an interest, right? You have to have an interest in what the organization is doing, but not necessarily have that in mind themselves, or have people reaching out to them to tell them about the great things that Park Pride is doing. So I think it's sort of a blend of, perhaps some of these people of color being more open to organizations that they necessarily may not have been thinking about being on boards for in the past, but once they get to know sort of the great work and the important work that this provides for the communities within Atlanta, they are much more receptive to it. And the sort of focus on reaching out to more people that are different and add different perspectives to the board. So, I think that I also came at a very lucky time in that I got to participate in the program that Dr. Hawkins gave to the board just about a year ago, not the board, but the staff and the executive committee, and Atiba and I also were able to join. And I thought it was just wonderful because when the cultural competency question was asked in the poll, I said I was ready and willing to learn, because I had come from these two communities, or three or four, whatever you want to call them, Latino, LGBT, immigrant, I'm still learning. I consider myself sort of a lifelong student in every aspect of my life, including cultural competency, because I have this sheet that Dr. Hawkins shared with us about how different communities look at different things like wealth and food, and based on your economic sort of stratus, you see those things completely different. And that was, it sort of blew my mind away and changed my mind about how I think about those things. So I think we're all on a journey on figuring out how we become a sort of community and an organization and a board and a staff that looks at these things from all these different perspectives, right? And just open and curious to learning about each other's experiences and histories and perspectives, so that we can try the best that we can to bring all of those things into the services we provide to our communities. So I think I'll leave it there. But
thank you.
Off to Dr. Hawkins.
Thank you so much. I really want to just highlight a couple things before I invite Good Samaritan starting with Lauren to share with us that journey continuously. There's so many different aspects. We're all learning different pieces, and that there's great places to start. So recognizing that maybe you start internally, maybe you start with your board, including different voices, but that we want to also lift up the passions and the connections. So I think that just hearing that, and I could feel that too from you, Louise, of just like there's a real passion and love for this work, and that we all want to be lifted up for those things. So I'd like to go ahead and invite Lauren to get us started with Veronica. Yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am so delighted to be able to share on this platform with each of you from the platform of Good Samaritan. Just a little background on myself. I was born in London, England. I lived there for a number of years. After graduating from school, moved to the United States with my parents. And I lived out of New York for a number of years. I've lived in several different countries. I lived in the Bahamas. My knight in shining armor, my late husband now, was from the Bahamas. So I lived there for about 20 years, and relocated after he passed here to Atlanta to be with my parents, who are older. And what's amazing, I've been with the Good Samaritan Health Center for 4 years. I came here as a volunteer, and now working in the capacity of a community outreach manager. And I have a love for people. I have a love for the hearts of people. And working in this capacity as community outreach manager has given me an opportunity to really reach out and find out what are the needs in our community. And we've gone from the extent of to hear the voice of the community. What we've done is actually gone and connected with some of our community leaders who are well respected in the community. And I can mention one name right now that we've connected with, and that is Mother Mamie Moore. Some of you know her, some of you may not, but she is not only a respected voice in the community, but she's recognized, and she's a very real person. And we have the opportunity to dialogue, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly. And what it's provided is an opportunity to find out what is the need, what are the needs rather in the community. She's in English Avenue, we're right here in Bankhead. What are the needs of our people? And she's been able to provide that information for us so that as we build our programs are geared to reaching the community. Of course, most of you know with COVID right now, we've had to navigate differently. In times past, persons would have been able to come into Good Sam. If we have cooking with nutrition, we would have those persons come in, sit down in our teaching kitchen, and we'll be enlightened, encouraged, and empowered through the trained chefs and nutritionists in their field. So what Mother Moore has been able to do is provide that information for us, the needs. And what we've done is to facilitate our programs so that we can meet those needs. And what is amazing is when you bring like-minded persons together, like-minded minds, she's a great source of information. And I can tell you some of the programs that we've actually started within the community, which has brought community leaders together. We at Good Sam was able to start since COVID, we started a prayer call on Mondays. And during that prayer call, it's 7 o'clock on a Monday morning, as staff, as persons are journeying to work, Monday mornings, they're able to jump on a call, which I've been honored and humbled to lead every Monday morning. So what we've also done is included and invited some of our community leaders to be on that call so that we can not only just pray, but we can pray for the needs. We can ask what are the, not only what the needs are, but we had a situation recently where we invited, this past Monday actually, two of our community leaders, Pastor Drew from Fountain of Hope, and there's also Pastor Winston Taylor, who's building or opening a restaurant in the area for healthy eating. And through these umbrellas, through these avenues, these three persons, actually more, because we've also connected with Redeemer from in the neighborhood, and they've been able to provide some pertinent information. What is the cry? One of the cry we've heard is, a lot of our persons are fearful, even in regard with the COVID vaccinations. They want to know more. They want to be enlightened as to what the vaccine, what it all contains. They want to know what's going on in the community. A lot are affected by the mental health issues. How can we encourage? How can we, we're here at Good Sam, our mission is to spread God's love through quality healthcare to those who are in need. And that's not just from the medical standpoint, that's all point. How do we, we talk about, you've got to be courageous. You've got to come, I definitely echo the sentiments of all that have spoken prior, in the fact that we no one knows that in its totality, all the right ways to go, but we are approaching it from the fact that it's been said, this is a journey. And how can we meet the needs? How can we help? what sort resources can be provided to help persons on this journey. You know, we've had situations just at the beginning of COVID, and this is through our programs that we've offered. I've been able to talk with some of the people in the community, persons who are afraid to actually come out because of the fact that they are fearful, you know.
Yeah.
So you're like, well, how do you help a person who's fearful? How do you provide some type of a hope to let them know, well, you know,
Right.
you know, all is not lost.
So true.
But that's just a few things
Mhm.
that we've done.
Well, thank you. I know that we wanted to hear, we'll be coming back in just a little bit. We're going to do a breakout group, but I wanted to invite Veronica to also just say a few things about the journey and to have you all be thinking about, you know, where are you? What's resonating in these stories about where you are in your organization as well. So Veronica, thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I'm sure from that you can all see why working with Loren is just a delight. Her presence and who she is just such a gift to me every day. She did a really nice job of speaking to how we're thinking about equity work from an external perspective, but I did just want to speak briefly to the process we've gone through from an internal perspective, really from the beginning. I'm going to move through this quickly, but from the beginning, and then with the murder of George Floyd being kind of a turning point and what we've done from there. So for those of you who don't know, Good Sam was essentially started with a vision of health equity. So Dr. Bill Warren, an Atlanta pediatrician who had started his career practicing in the suburbs, Sandy Springs, noticed that there were huge gaps between health resources and outcomes in the city. And after a long time of thinking and praying about it, he ended up leaving his private practice to establish a health clinic in downtown Atlanta, now on the west side. And so from the beginning, there was a heart for health equity and issues of equity. I think over the course of our history, that has been the spirit, but we haven't necessarily articulated our work that way. We kind of just thought of ourselves as we're just here to do the work. We want to be good doctors and dentists. We want to love on our patients. And that in doing that, we would be addressing these issues of equity. I think what the George Floyd, why that was a turning point for us is that what we started to hear from our staff was they wanted to see the organization articulate more clearly what we thought about equity and how we stood for it. So the first thing we did in response was to draft a racial equity statement that actually still lives on our website. Just speak from Dr. Warren's kind of giving our organizational stance on what had happened and thoughts related to racial equity. I think that was a positive step, and I'm going to be real transparent about kind of what we've done well, where we could improve, because, you know, if I can save someone going through maybe some of the same traps or tough spots, I'd be happy to do that. So after we published that statement, you know, we had some staff, we have a very diverse team. We had some staff that felt really good about it. And then we had others who kind of asked the question of like, why now? You know, George Floyd's death was not the first instance of racial injustice. Why hasn't Good Sam talked about this or had a statement before? You know, we've been around for 22 years, kind of that why now question. So that gave our leadership enough pause to say, we need to survey our staff and get a better sense of where they're at, what they're feeling. And so we did a really open, anonymous staff survey, just asking questions around issues of equity. How do they feel supported? How do they not feel supported? And got some really valuable feedback from that. And in the feedback, I think our senior leadership team, which is an all-white team at this moment, just felt like we needed more help to move forward in a thoughtful way that communicated we were taking staff concerns and thoughts seriously. So we actually engaged two consultants of color One who is a public health coach and consultant who is helping us more with just kind of internal staff challenges. So if there is a friction on a team, or if there is a sense of, you know, my boss just isn't hearing me, kind of more of those person to person issues that she kind of can meet with and help us think through that. The other consultant is helping us more on the HR side, so that if we ever have an instance of someone who feels like there's implicit bias or unfair situation, that they actually have an HR professional and the senior leadership team has someone we can seek for counsel on some of those maybe more serious issues. I should say we haven't had any of those, but we're just trying to be proactive and think that if we ever did, you know, what is the structure for those to be addressed. The other couple things that we're, you know, still in the process of working on, I should say, we are definitely in the middle of this journey. We haven't figured it out. I think I was invited to speak on this just because we're muddling through, so happy to share that process. The other thing we're doing is just working with our board on a more intentional process to diversify our top leadership. So we have a committee, we've completed a board matrix, we have a, you know, a recruitment pipeline to bring on more people of color on our board, which is and has been largely white over the years. So there's some effort there. And then the other thing we're working on with the HR consultant is just really elevating our middle management in terms of professional development opportunities. I mentioned our senior team is largely white. Our middle management team is not. It's very diverse. So you can imagine when opportunities like my role or others might open up, that there would be those people who are ready to step into senior roles. And then I'll just end with sharing something that the HR consultant shared with me, which I thought was such a good summary of where we're at, and maybe a summary of where some of you all may be at too. And she just said that as we talked about rewriting our employee handbook, that was the topic of the conversation. She just said she can see that equity is in the spirit of the organization, but it's not yet in the system. It's not yet written into the policies. And so I just thought that that was really wise, that she recognized like our heart is in it, but there's still more work we need to do to institutionalize it.
Thank you so much. I think that's a great place to get us ready for our breakout conversation, which is we want each person to really have a minute or so to share where you are in this journey, and also to be thinking toward the end. My question, I'll just do a begin with the end in mind. What are 3 wishes that you have for being able to help you along this journey? We will be asking you to add that into the chat later. But this first breakout conversation, just to share a little bit about where you are. I don't know if you all use your little, reaction icons, but I love to just see if we had some thumbs up and some hearts here for those conversations. Thank you for everyone leaning in. We do want to take just a couple minutes. There are a few facilitators who might help share out. And one of the ways I can know if you want to share out is if you could write the word stack in the chat box, then I will call on you. But also it would be great if we could start to collect what people are saying. So Karen is going to start us off.
Hi, I had Brad from Quest and Adam from the Tool Bank in my session, and we had a great discussion about kind of where we were. And we talked a lot about needing data and really wanting to measure the impact of equity work that was going on. That's a lot of what Brad had talked about with Quest in particular, and how to kind of lead external coalitions towards greater equity work, which is actually something that GCN is working on with BCN through these kinds of initiatives. So Quest is creating a kind of a shared services site, and many organizations will be under one roof. So how do you kind of move a coalition? How do you measure impact? And then we talked a lot with about our own internal kind of journey in terms of our board, our staff, how we're kind of, again, measuring things, having these conversations internally, and where we were on that journey. So I think all of us are sort of kind of in the middle of the muddle, as they say.
That sounds awesome. So measurement, data, stories. Let's see, Victoria next.
Hi there, I'm Victoria with the Center for Pan-Asian Community Services, and I had Lisa with Horizon Theater, Heather with Home Depot Foundation, and Susan with the ATL ANTP. We had a really great conversation about the intentional work that's still happening in each of our organizations, whether it be making sure that our leadership reflects the community and our employees, and then also being intentional about hiring and slowing down the process of hiring. I thought that was a really great conversation to make sure that the makeup of our board, the makeup of our leadership, the C-suites, and our staff is reflective of the community. And there was a really great comment from Lisa of the deep conversations that need to be had, and deep conversations around healing, and bringing in consultants and making sure resources are available. And I thought that was really amazing to hear. And then also talking about making sure there's a pipeline for a lot of our for nonprofits like me, community members or leaders or staff, to rise to leadership or C-suites.
The best phrase for 2020 and 2021, you're on mute. I had Open Hand, I had Atlanta Ballet, I had Legal Aid. I think one point that was made that really struck me is one organization is working holistically to have conversations, and they've got pretty good involvement from more of the leadership, the salaried staff, but the hourly people are reluctant to participate, and really looking at, is that a matter of trust? And it's a matter of time as well. And so how do you make it a safe conversation for folks, and how do you make sure that you allot the time for that? And then the other thing that I heard was, again, that really leadership being white, and as you look then at kind of the triangle of the organization, as you move again into maybe more of those entry positions, more of those being people of color, and how do you create more diversity throughout your organization and in your leadership?
And then our last person, Christian.
Good morning, everyone. So I had with me first readers, Davida, as well as Howard and Terrell with Piedmont Park Conservancy. And together we talked about some of the things that we're doing with our staff, including some trainings, as well as other opportunities like employee resource groups. And the Piedmont Conservancy has also created a culture council that sounds really interesting as a way to really breathe in and talk about issues as they arise and different things that they can also tackle ahead of time. Also, what we're doing with our boards, considering our board leadership, looking again at those matrices to really say, what are we looking for and how do we expand upon diversity in our board leadership, as well as even creating special committees at the board level to really consider this topic in conversation. So lots of things that are already happening, and many of us have been on this journey for different periods of time, maybe it's our whole entire lives, but also feeling like we're in a new space of understanding right now.
Well, I'm certainly hearing like the questions and learning how to talk about these things, understanding how to bring this to our day-to-day. At least that was one of the other things I heard in my group. I'd like to invite our panel to help us with this other question, which is, how do we talk about why this is imperative? Why is it imperative to the mission of your organization? And maybe even what the why is, because sometimes when we talk about these issues, it ends up being about, counting numbers like diversity, instead of also thinking about the acknowledging history, acknowledging the role of racism, really understanding the role of inclusion. So I'm not sure who wants to go first, if it should be Good Samaritan, if you want to maybe kick us off of the why this is imperative.
I'll share, Loren spoke a lot about our foundation at Good Samaritan is from a faith-based perspective, spreading a Christian mission through quality healthcare. And so when the incident occurred with George Floyd, I think there was a sense amongst our staff of what is a kind of a Jewish tradition in the Old Testament of symbolically like sitting in sackcloth with ashes on our head and just being really broken for what was becoming more a growing awareness amongst our white staff of what had been an experience for maybe many of our other staff members that we hadn't fully realized prior. And then of course, that extends to many of our patients who are from diverse backgrounds. And so I think for us, the why was just, if a part of our family, our extended family as an organization is hurting, then we all hurt together. And trying to be able to both hold that pain, but then also be thoughtful about what can we do about it. I know for me, just as a white leader, there were definitely moments when I thought like, maybe I just need to step aside. Like we just need less white people at the top. And Loren and others on my team were just really good about saying, you don't need to step aside. We need people in positions of leadership that are willing to just walk forward through this with us. And so I'll say that my colleagues of color played a big role in just encouraging me to be confident that I was in the right place for such a time as this, because there were definitely moments when I was like, I'm happy to step aside, let somebody else come in that, looks like the community and has the background in the community. So I think, the why for us was just, this is part of our family that's hurting. And then I think affirmation from my staff that they know we want you in this role and we want you to lead us as a part of a team, but lead us through this was really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like we just have to take that in, just really sit with what you have shared with that and how important it is to recognize where you are and the role that you can play and how important that is.
And I can talk a little bit about Park Pride and then have Michael fill in where I may have some gaps or make some mistakes. But as I think Michael mentioned earlier, we had started down this path a few years ago, and that was the leadership team's decision to recognize that success for the organization meant equitable distribution of the services throughout the communities in Atlanta, right? So that you sort of have to equate your success of the organization with equity as far as diversity and inclusion, right? Because our community is diverse throughout the city. So they had gone down that path when I started having conversations about joining the board. We were already talking about the potential for a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee of the board, which we've since formed, and I'm co-chairing with Jeffrey Ellman, who's at Jones Day, but that was already sort of part of the plan before I even joined, and before the George Floyd murder sort of spurred more discussion around this topic and more focus around it. But what we've been doing as part of the DEI committee is sort of trying to figure out, because like as you said earlier, diversity, equity, and inclusion can be so many things, and it can be everything, right? So figuring out how to tackle, little pieces here and there. Obviously, some of that is learning and education, and we've had the benefit of having Dr. Dietra Hawkins help us in that regard. And that happened, like we said, a year ago for the staff and the executive committee and some of us on the board that are now part of the DEI committee, but now continuing that education to the full board, to new board members that joined this year. So we're going to continue going down that path so that we're all at least speaking the same language, aware of how that language translates to our programming and our services. And I think Michael can talk to you about how we've looked at, for example, our grant making process and trying to make that more equitable in meeting communities where they are versus an expectation that all communities are going to come with the same sort of education on their own, resources on their own, and sort of time and ability, right, as another community might. So we've, I think started with diversity at the board level. Look, we have discussions with Michael about diversity as far as the staff goes. And now we're really going to spend, I think, the rest of this year and next year focusing on our programs, right, and how we can make those more equitable in terms of the policies around them, the processes, how we engage with communities. So I think that is sort of the next step. But like I said, it's going to be an ongoing committee of the board just because the work will never really be done, right? Well, I mean, it would be ideal if it would be, but it probably won't be anytime soon. So I think as much as we have been on the journey for a couple of years, I think at Park Pride, the journey continues and there's tons of work to do.
I like to think of the work as generative. It just, it grows in a positive direction instead of the work being something that you are doing as oh, we've done it now. There's always new ways to grow, and it actually helps with what you're trying to, what we want to achieve. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if Michael or Lauren want to hop in here with a couple of quick comments before we bring the groups back into it.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to chime in. One of the recent things that we've done, and like the question asks, why is it imperative now? From Good Sam's standpoint, we recognize that it's really imperative now. And we went a step further by our recent staff meeting that we had, and this is the month for celebrating Black history. We invited Mother Moore to be the speaker for our meeting, and it was amazing. She came and she spoke, and as you know, Mother Moore is a very humble person, but there was so much that was derived from that meeting. She was able to tell us what the needs are. Of course, we know right now people are challenged mentally, and she was able to find out that, okay, Good Sam is, a comprehensive center where we do offer services such as counseling. And that was very insightful for her, because she's like, wow, this is a way we can partner, and we have people in our community that needs that service. So right away, persons, even our counselors, were engaged, trying to find out, well, how can we set up, we've been talking about probably setting up something virtually, because right now, because of the pandemic, everything has to be social distancing. And even a lot of our programs that we are offering is from that standpoint of virtual. On a Sunday, Good Sam offers what we call a Good Sam Trinity Hour. But Mother Moore and I, we are working at looking at some things, even in regards to the vaccine, of seeing how we can provide an umbrella for persons to be informed about the vaccine. Wow. And there was a lot that was derived, as I said, from that conversation with Mother Moore meeting. And persons came to me after that meeting to find out how can we set up an appointment with Mother Moore so we can better impact our community, meet the needs. It's just amazing.
I just want to highlight what you're saying, which is centering the voices, hearing the stories, and coming together, because then there's a solution that can be found. And sometimes we don't realize how important what I call a cross-perspective dialogue is, really having the way that they were able to hear and start moving, and motivated to do that. What a beautiful story. Thank you. Michael, you want to give us 1 or
Yeah,
2 minutes here, we'll go to the group.
I'll just briefly mention, first off, I think that Luis did a great job of kind of explaining. I think the reason why this is important really comes back to our mission, is to engage communities, to activate the power of parks, and the idea that communities means all communities. I think during this pandemic, where people have been cloistered in their homes, the idea of quality parks where you live have never been more important. We have never heard more from folks who have said, there's this park near where I live that I didn't even know was there. And I think the fact that you look at higher rates of exposure and all the different issues on the public health side of things, and the lack of comparable access to quality green space, is something that makes me feel like this is a crucible of a moment for our organization to live up to our full vision, which I think is at least the way that it has come together with Park Pride. In my time at Park Pride, I've gotten to see the many different Atlantas, and I think our staff and our board in different ways have been vantage points to get to see a richer sense of all the different neighborhoods that make up the city of Atlanta. But our work really began with staff seeking out opportunities to become better ambassadors to the organization on that front. Something that's important about that is what the why for us was not where a number of different white-led organizations were called out really after the killing of George Floyd. And in some cases, those words of support and empathy only went so far. And I think that I've seen a number of different groups who have tried to, if anything, shy away from these issues, and if anything, have felt that courage gap, if anything, has increased. We, in some respects, had a chance of actually starting this conversation in advance, and had the uncomfortable conversations that began with our strategic plan of looking at our core values. But what I do feel fortunate about was the organization had a chance to start to build that muscle memory, so that as the issues started to come up, there was, and again, we had put out a statement that showed empathy with Black communities, both locally and nationally, but also put out there the idea that words only go so far. And that actually became a platform to look at our conversations with our funders, with our friends of the park groups and partners, to look at taking this work that had been internal and looking at ways that we wanted to kind of move forward in different ways to be more explicit. And it really was an empowering experience, I think, for our board, of feeling like everyone has a role to play, which was a very different vibe than kind of a concern over being called out. So I think that that is something that I feel has been more a combination of luck and coalescing factors. And I cringe a little bit when I hear the thought that we started working on these issues ahead of the curve, because I don't think that we were working on these ahead of the curve. We're a 30-year-old nonprofit organization, and I feel like there's ways that we have addressed these issues, but other ways that they've been allowed to fester for far too long. But I feel like the conversation has been a very constructive one, where people have been invited to step in rather than that fear of being called out. And I think that that's been critical to, I think, getting folks to feel like they're prepared for this journey ahead, as opposed to feeling that sense of feeling battered and wondering when we can turn the page and work on something else.
Thank you so much for bringing that languaging in. I think sometimes there is a fear of the call out. And so being invitational, really understanding how we can call people in and have the conversation. I think if you have a chance to participate in what's called the dinner event, that's one of the outcomes, is that people learn, oh, we can have these conversations. They're okay. Let me show up. Now they're virtual. It's even easier. We do want to continue to invite you to have these conversations and to come up with ideas. So we're going to go into our next breakout conversation and have you have a chance to talk about why this is imperative, and what you might want to do to be creating more of a culture of equity in your organization. Welcome back. I don't know about you, but we're having some rich conversations and really trying to dig in. Probably more than anything else, we need more time to do this, right? Like more opportunities to explore, connect, continue to do this with each other. If I can again invite people who want to share out to write stack in the chat, I'll know to call on you. And I see Nancy first.
Again, great group of folks. We had who joined us, someone from the Urban League, someone from Horizon Theater. Two things that I heard that I think were, it was all important, but that spoke to me. We had a number of folks that did surveys to get feedback about what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and a couple of folks that information was not shared with the staff, and that was very difficult, and it really created a lack of trust, and staff felt like it went into a black hole on what's really being done about it. Another organization, they do their surveys yearly so that they're doing it on an ongoing basis. And then at the end or the beginning of the next year, they report back what they've done that year to respond to what was in the surveys. And another really important part was, or piece of it, I thought, was if you have been the recipient of racial harm and racial injury in a job setting, it's much more difficult to be like, oh, kumbaya, and we're all going to talk about it, because there's pain and there's difficulty there. And the importance of organizations starting that conversation with the acknowledgement is there's racism within this organization, and we need to acknowledge that, and we need to and have that as an understanding as we move into this conversation.
Thank you. That is so helpful, and acknowledging that pain is very important. Dana.
Hello, everyone. So in our group, we had representatives from Safe House Outreach, Horizon, Home Depot Foundation, as well as, there's one more, Grant Park, sorry. So our conversation, we kind of started with talking about the example that was given in the second session about Veronica feeling like maybe she had to step aside in order for someone else to lead, and that her staff came and supported her and not stepping aside, and how that was a powerful moment. But then we, kind of asked the question is, who is the right person to lead? And then not everyone has the same answer about that. There is no right answer a lot of times. And so how do you get through that process of making everyone feel brought in and engaged, so they feel comfortable with who is selected to lead and how that process is going? We had some conversation about how you do that, right? It's about listening, making sure that you're tapping into your networks, and then amplifying those voices that may not be heard, right? So if there are voices that are not on the senior leadership or on the board, but you are getting feedback from them, how do you amplify those voices in a way that they feel like their voices mattered and are being taken into consideration? We also talked about, and the other part of that is also obviously building trust, right? So people have to trust you in order to tell you how they feel, to share their voice with you in order for you to amplify it. So trust has to be part of that process. And we also talked about, how do you diversify your network so you even have people to talk to, right? So you have to be intentional about diversifying your network before you need them, so that it feels authentic. And that process has to, really start with the basic things of relating to people as people. So we talked about, going to coffee and, who's like around your dinner table and what those conversations that you're having to ensure that you're being intentional about your network diversity, and that it's leading you to being able to answer the questions that are hard throughout this process.
Excellent. Charmin.
Oh, got me unmuted. Hi. Our group, I was really with Park Pride, GCN, and oh my goodness, I'm sorry, my brain is, I can't remember my last group, but anyway, we talked about intentionality. The question that came to me was, what do you do what does your HR team do to make sure that you all are intentional? first of all, we really don't have an HR team. And, but I'm with YWCA of Greater Atlanta. Our mission is all around eliminating racism and empowering women. So everything we do is intentional. We have to live our mission. Otherwise, we're hypocrites. Our board, we have a very diverse board. If one year my board chair is Black, I go for another. We try to make sure that somebody is white or of another ethnicity the next term. It's how we set up, it's how we live, it's how we operate. We don't have to have rules around that when that's who you are. And that's where we all have to get to, being in, I'm so often reminded of an old line from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when Carlton and Will were talking to each other. And Will said, but Carlton, you don't act Black. And he said, I don't have to act Black. I am Black. So if you are intentionally setting forth being equitable, and that becomes who you want, who you are as an organization, you don't have to have those rules in place. You have to just live it. So that's what we do. We're very strategic with how we live. We are strategic in, even when I first came back here in the organization and my staff was largely Black, I said to them, we need some diversity here.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So whatever side you're on, it's just something you have to live and breathe and do and be.
Right. Thank you. We have about 7 more people. Jen, this is great. We've got so many beautiful things to share.
Great. So I'll be brief, Dr. Hawkins, so we can get to some of the other groups. So our group had Piedmont Park Conservancy, First Readers, Girl Scouts, and Georgia Casa. And we culminated our conversation really talking about really wanting to be able to capture what we hear and learn in this space, to be able to share back with our teams and keep everyone motivated and really inspired by what our organization and what other organizations are doing. And so just kind of thinking about how to share out from these sessions. And then really thinking, we talked about those internal teams that are working now and how to support them, and providing that space and time, recognizing exhaustion among our team members, and really the practicality of what they're doing and what it looks like. I think Dr. Hawkins, you shared about that generative work. So if there's an internal committee that's working, always kind of like you said, kind of looking forward to where you want to go and how those teams might evolve over time.
Excellent. Dennis.
Let me unmute. As I was sharing with my group, my staff usually tells me to mute because they get tired of me droning on. But we talked about time, like the 15 minutes really was not enough time. We could have went so much deeper, but I understand for the purposes of this. And I'm gonna make this real brief because I know Karen wants us to stay real close to time. But we talked about the importance of those uncomfortable conversations, how important it is to have those conversations without necessarily having an answer, but just having the uncomfortable conversations. But then it became very straightforward and candid that it's unfortunate that some of these conversations are framed as though they're new conversations to help move us forward. But in reality, they're very old conversations and nothing has changed. So there's a bit of reticence or apprehension about, is it really going to make a difference? It's just 2 different spectrums. It's not a new conversation. It's an old conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and we talked about fixing the system, but we also acknowledge that a system is not broken that's operating the way it was designed to operate.
Right.
And the language maybe is not being okay with the system or looking at changing a system. But when we say a system is broken, we're kind of giving credit that the system wasn't designed to do what it's doing. And that's actually where it is. There was a conversation that I had when you talk about the system. I have a friend and she and I were talking and she said she has a Black godson. It's like, oh, okay. You know, you get points for that, I guess. And she didn't understand how the system was broken. And I asked her, how long had her family been in the United States? And she said she's a third generation German. Her grandparents are from Germany. But today, she's an American. And I probably am 20th generation American, but I'm still an African American. And it's just little subtle things like that that says, okay, you're not quite where you are. And I think where we ended up is that the only way through reconciliation is through truth. And unless America acknowledges, because I can't really apologize to you if I don't acknowledge what I did to harm you. And that's kind of where we ended up. And then our 15 minutes was out. But it could have gotten a lot deeper.
Absolutely. We need more time to really unpack that, the language, the story, what has happened. I will offer in our group the idea of really trying to have a both and approach, doing things both internally and externally. And we have 3 other people that were on the list to go quickly. Lauren, Terrell, and Victoria, will have you up next. And then while we are bringing those people on to share, we want you to start adding in the chat, what are your 3 wishes? I think I'll only have like 30 seconds for the panelists to maybe share a final word as we close up. Lauren?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to invite Terrell Henderson to represent us.
Okay.
Group 6, Terrell Henderson.
Yeah, thank you. So in our group, it kind of became almost a showcase for the Piedmont Park Conservancy. We talked a lot about what we're doing on different levels. So on a board level, we actually just started a board committee that's made up of board members that's solely about DEI. And Tanya Das, who's also on this webinar, is the chair of that committee. So I want to, give one to Tanya for taking the lead on that. It's going to be a great group that we're going to pull together. And just after our first meeting yesterday, everyone was very excited and passionate about doing this. And then along with that, kind of right along the same time, we're going to have what we call the Culture Council, which is a staff-driven DEI committee. And that group is going to meet every other month and really just trying to get the staff being able to believe in this and feel, hey, this is important. And from a staff level, show our commitment to DEI in the park. I mean, Piedmont Park, everyone is here, no matter what your race, color, religion, everything like that. So if we can't, as an organization, do it, how are we going to make sure that it happens for everyone who comes into the park?
Thank you. So Victoria, you have our last moment before we wrap this up.
Yeah, no, I'll be quick. We just had some really great conversations, and of course, time is too short, but we were just being intentional about talking about the trainings and tools. And I think something that I believe Lisa had mentioned was the learning to lead part. As we're moving people in the different tiers or in leadership positions, it's like, who are the leaders and how do they welcome? And that kind of leads us to the welcoming and safe spaces. There were a lot of conversations about that and making sure that the constituents represents the community, but what does welcoming mean? When there's a kind of an imbalance of power that led us to like the silence because of power conversation, where a lot of the invited, maybe new board members or new leadership members may not have kind of equal footing in terms of being seasoned in that space, but are experts in different spaces. But how do we be intentional about making sure that there's comfort there and making sure that their contributions are meaningful and being intentional about that? And also piloting and testing. I know there was conversations about lessons learned about sometimes things don't work, and and recognizing that sometimes when you have multi-layer leadership there, it could cause a lot of staff to not speak up, and being intentional about that. But so the conversations were really great, and I look forward to more.
I'll highlight, I'm hearing there's just so much wisdom here in this group as well. And so part of what might also be useful is just being able to hear and share that with each other, that we all have stories that we can share and spend more time on this. I am seeing some wishes in the chat. Please continue to share what those are. In our work, using wishes to actually create the roadmap is one of the things that makes a big difference. It's a little bit different, it sort of gives you room to dream. So love just the idea of, putting in there, what are those wishes? And then we can work together to explore what those things might be. I know we only have like 3 or 4 minutes left, so I am going to close this out and just say thank you again to our panelists. We had hoped to have you have some other closing comments, but I think we can start to do a wrap up here.
Well, this is Karen again. Thank you, everybody, for these brave conversations. Thank you, Dr. Dietra, for leading us through them. And Veronica, Luis, Lauren, and Michael for all your preparation and assistance in telling your story to the rest of us. I know that we're all hungry to hear what our peers are doing, and finding those entry points and places where we can learn from one another about how to do this work in our organizations and our community. It's so important. And I do appreciate everybody kind of putting in the chat, some of your call outs of recommendations, but as well, your experiences and things to think about. We are turning our attention to how to pursue this work and how to resource you to do that. It's part of GCN's equity strategy to do that. And so these comments and these conversations are really helpful to us to both learn ourselves, but also learn how to act, and be active in this work in support of you. So continue as you leave. I know a lot of people have to go grab a lunch or take care of a kid or whatever you've got going on, but continue to put into chat, your 3 wishes. We're going to follow up with a, post survey around this, so you'll have another opportunity. But I do want to thank everybody. And again, awesome to our partner, the Home Depot Foundation, for allowing us this time and this space and grace to do these amazing conversations with all of you. Thank you for your leadership very much. Heather, any closing?
I'll go ahead and close us. I just want to thank again. I just want to thank again all of our presenters and everyone joining the call. I know sometimes, these discussions can be tiring, but then you have them and they're re-energizing. And so I think it's very important to continue to have them, to continue to do the work. It is hard. One thing my group talked about a lot is being intentional. So making sure that we are intentional in the work so that we can move forward in this space. And so again, just thank you for everyone for joining. I know 2 hours is a lot of time, especially on a call. So I appreciate everyone, providing us this time to talk through everything.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll be following up with more to come. So put on your calendar, don't forget, March 24th, Out of Hand Theater. We're going to have a coffee/dinner play. All right. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day, everybody.